Hey guys, how are you, Gwen?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Hey guys, thank you for joining Dark Society Paranormal Podcast. I am Shane McLain. I am your host, and this is my producer, Gwen. And we are so excited about being here.
Absolutely.
I, you know, I have one of the best guests tonight. And I think you guys are going to know her immediately. I look forward to speaking to this lady. She is very much accomplished and she has one of the best names in the paranormal field itself. And I'm just excited about having her. So let's bring
Let's
her
bring her
on.
on. Here
Hey
she
Hey
guys.
guys, hey
is.
guys. This is the famous Miranda Young, the ghost biker. I love that. I love
I
that.
love it too.
Thank you.
And it's crazy because there's different genres of like people do things similar to. I don't see many people doing like what you do.
No, it's a little bit of a different twist. I like to use the paranormal as a way to promote tourism and historic preservation. And so using often when I was part of a team, I would travel on my motorcycle to the different places when I would investigate. And it kind of started as a little bit of a joke because I was like, yeah, just call me the ghost biker. And
Perfect.
one of my friends was
Mhm.
like, I would watch that. And
Yeah.
so I got to thinking because I was always doing a lot on my own,
Mhm.
aside from the team. And so my background in my career is in marketing, graphic design, public relations. And so that got my marketing mind going when I was thinking about that. And so I thought, why don't I try it and see? And so I sat down, created my logo, developed my brand, and started putting the show out. And so it was so much work being a solo investigator and producer of the show that essentially I ended up stepping away from the team because the team that I was a member of was an extremely active team that had been investigating for a long time. So they were some great guys to be able to cut my teeth learning about investigation strategies and techniques and everything. But I had to step away from that to kind of see where Ghost Biker went, and here we are. We just had our 7th season of the show,
That's
Yay.
amazing.
and yeah,
Yes.
and do a podcast and also a location owner. So it's really cool and interesting to see how things progress over time to go from essentially a hobby to this is my full-time job.
That's amazing. And I'm so glad to have you on because
Yes. Thank you.
just your positivity and what you bring into this field, is very much needed. Before we get into asking questions like that about your team and everything, why don't you just tell everybody about yourself? You got into it a little bit, but just tell us who you are.
Sure, absolutely. So I come from a little small rural community here in rural East Tennessee, a little area known as Huntsville, and it is just like I said. I mean, it is deep in the Appalachian Mountains here, and it's very very small. Um, I had an interest in the paranormal from when I was a child. I didn't have really any experiences as a child to speak of. However, I did have my spent a lot of time with my grandmother, who at the time when I was young, she was in her 80s, and I was blessed enough that she lived next door to me growing up. So I spent every day that I could sitting on the porch listening to her tell stories about growing up in the Appalachian Mountains in the early 1900s. And so as we call it around here, she'd tell us the stories about the haints and the boogers, or now the ghosts and the cryptids. And so she told me all these amazing stories And she was also the type of person, she believed in superstitions, signs, omens, lived by the Farmer's Almanac. I always said, she could predict when the first snowfall was going to come based on whenever
Wow.
the fog hit there in August. She could predict that sort of thing, and then when the storms were coming and all that sort of stuff.
Wow.
So I spent that time taking in as much of that information as I could. And then after I started, when I was in school and such, I spent as much time as I could in the library. And I loved books on hauntings and folklore and legends, that sort of thing. And it wasn't until of course, I fell in love with Unsolved Mysteries. Loved that show.
Oh yeah. Oh
Of
yeah.
course, of
Scared
course.
the crap out of me. However, there's something kind of special about that feeling, something that is entertaining enough to watch, but also scares you to where you can't sleep at night.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And
Yes.
so anyways, I grew up watching and listening and taking all of that in. And it wasn't until the paranormal entertainment shows of I guess in the early 2000s hit that really and I didn't watch a whole lot of them, but I watched enough to know that it's like, hey, that's what we used to do in the cemeteries. So this is cool that it's becoming a little more mainstream. And
Mhm.
it wasn't until I was at a job there in Chattanooga when I worked corporate that I was approached by a guy who had a team down in Chattanooga, and he said, "I see your background is in photography." And he goes, "I've kind of got some strange pictures I'd like for you to look at if you're interested." And of course, for me, it was like, wait a minute. So this guy's approached me about looking at strange pictures. What's he got in mind? And so he ended up telling me that he was a member of a paranormal team, or he was a founder of a team. And he asked if I could essentially look at these pictures and use my professional photography background to explain some of the anomalies that they were capturing, essentially trying to debunk their own stuff. And so I said, that'd be great. And of course, as he gives me these pictures, I have more questions than answers, because when someone gives a picture, it's like, okay, first thing I'm going to ask you is, why did you decide to take this picture? What's going on? What type of camera did you use? I tried to get as much of the general information as possible. And so, one photo turned into two turned into 15. And here we are about 30 photos later, and they're inviting me to go on my first investigation, which
Awesome.
was, yeah,
Yes.
it was of a restaurant at a bar in Marina there in Chattanooga. And like most folks, going in and experiencing it for myself uh, with the recorder and, having the different tools go off and even being touched on that first night, I was absolutely bit by the bug. And so they ended up inviting me to become a member of the team. And at that point in time, we did mostly residentials, because being
Hmm.
there in Chattanooga, we're right there in the middle of, or very, very close to two Civil War battlefields there of Lookout Mountain as well as Chickamauga, Georgia. And so we did a lot of the residential homes there, did at least one commercial location a month. I mean, they were a very active team, and did that for, I believe, about 7 years. I was a member of that team. I did their photography. I also worked to put out their videos, did their marketing and such. And I'd said at the top of the show, kind of how Ghost Biker got started.
Yeah.
And so in 2000, and I really didn't tell a lot of people that I was going to do Ghost Biker, because I've always been, at the time, I was more comfortable behind the camera rather than in front of it. And it was one of those things where when I started filming it, I was like, I don't know if I'm actually going to put this out or not, because, I don't know how well it's going to be received. And so I didn't tell anyone until I had gotten the episodes filmed and produced. And I started about a month before the release of just doing a media blitz, of putting it out there, trying to gain followers to watch the show and such. And after the first season released, it was a lot more popular than I thought it would be, because again, the whole premise of it was I wanted to keep the episodes relatively short, because average attention span is right around 20 to 25 minutes. And
Right.
so I wanted something that would talk about the motorcycle ride a little bit, or at least the area, giving some interesting facts of the area that I'm in and highlighting some of these lesser known stories, places that people had
Mm,
never visited before, maybe like local legends and such.
yeah.
So the first part of the show is telling that story while I'm there and then taking the people on the investigation. And so we highlighted some places in Southeast Tennessee, and did a follow-up episode on Thursday nights called Behind the Screams, where we talked about the equipment that was used and, some of the different techniques, because I didn't want to use that in the show. I kind of wanted to separate that so I could have more time on the show, doing the experiments and such. And at that point in time, I mean, there was so many people that was like, "Hey, you need to check these places out and such." And so, like I said, here we are, seven seasons later. We did kind of change the format up just a little bit in season 6, and we started doing the episodes live.
Oh,
And
that's great.
yeah,
I love it.
it was so much fun to do that. And we did places that weren't commercial locations.
Well, that's
Um,
perfect. That brings a spotlight to those.
Absolutely. Because, like I said, the goal with Ghost Biker was to try to take this subculture of the paranormal and reach a more mainstream audience, which would have been the biker community and the historian community there. But then also going in and using it for the historic preservation. So in
Mm,
season 6, we covered all museums, heritage centers, and old home places. Hey Good Meal there in South Carolina was one of them that we highlighted,
mm,
and basically using it to promote the events that they had going on during October, sharing about the location and promoting that while doing the paranormal.
mm.
This past season, we did all antique stores travel, and they were all in North Georgia. So these were places they had never been investigated for before, and places that this, maybe you had never heard of, but live close to. We highlighted Dahlonega, Georgia, Commerce,
Mhm.
Georgia, places in that northeast region of Georgia, and tried to promote those places to get people to come in and patronize those stores,
Right.
and got some pretty amazing evidence of the unexplained along the way while we were doing it. So, um, I think we're going to stick with the live format for the shows, because I love being able to interact with
Oh yeah.
people, especially when we're doing the investigation, because it just adds for a much richer experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so, along the way with that journey, I ended up meeting my best friend, Dr. Sumner, with Soul Sisters Paranormal, and we formed a company, History, Highways, and Haunts, back in 2021, and ended up I left corporate America and ended up moving back home to my hometown here to be closer to my mom, so that after my dad had passed. And so and I can talk more about this later, but we ended up approaching the mayor here of Huntsville, and reaching out to him and asking if we could open up the historic, or the old jail here in our community, as a paranormal research center and a true crime museum. And so they loved the idea, and so we've been open with that for 3 years. In September, this is our third year now, and other partnerships and stuff have come along the way. But yeah, at this point, content creator and 2 locations under our belt, um, full-time job doing it. So it's, like I said, it's pretty amazing to see the progression of things.
That's amazing.
It is.
You have such just a positive aura about you, and I can see, why people would love to have you come in and not only investigate but to make partnerships and stuff like that, because you could just tell you're a very genuine person, and you're nice, and I mean you're great with people, and I mean and you got a marketing background, right?
I do,
See,
yeah, and that's the thing, that's worked out really beneficial for us because we're able to run this as a female-owned two-person operation there at the jail because of, the fact that my business partner has a business background, business and security background, and, my background being in marketing. We're able to design all the pieces, all the merchandise in the, gift shop. Basically, we like to joke and say, we're the CEOs of the company, but if there's maintenance that needs to be done or janitorial work, we're in there doing that. We're, curating the museum, and we're giving the tours, and so,
CEO of all trades.
Yeah,
all
there you go.
trades, absolutely, absolutely. So it does work out really well, and and first off, thank you for your kind words. I appreciate what you're saying on that.
Yes, ma'am.
But we're
It
fans also. We're not
Yeah.
just, yeah, we're fans. So
well, thank you.
you're welcome.
It's been something that it's been really fun to do and really cool to see grow. Back, gosh, I guess it'll be 2 years this spring. We reached out to, we'd been having a lot of success with what we were doing there at the jail, and so
Mhm.
we reached out to the Village of Historic Rugby, or Historic Rugby Inc.,
Mm.
which is a small English village that's about 20 minutes from the jail. So we reached out to them because they had no after dark program. They definitely had the activity and the high strangeness there in the area, but they didn't have anything there in that area as far as the after dark tours. And so that's
When
one
you
of the
say
things.
after dark tours like that, I mean you're talking about like investigations and
It
things
so
like that.
it encompasses really anything that it would be after hours. So, for us, we formed a partnership with them called Historic Rugby After Dark, and we
Okay.
do all of these tours. We have 2 lantern tours that we do around the village, and, which incorporates their haunted history walks. So
Mm.
we do those 2 walks. We do guided ghost hunts there that either I lead as Ghost Biker or Christy leads as Soul Sisters Paranormal. Those are for the more novice hunts,
Oh yeah.
but those are 3-hour guided ghost hunts. And then we offer private paranormal investigations where essentially the private teams come in and they do their thing, and we're just there letting them in. And so through that, we'll take the Village of Historic Rugby, for example. Through
Mhm.
that, they're making money on their operation dollars to keep the doors open there and during their after hours when essentially the village would just be sitting there quiet. So we talk to different museums and different places trying to encourage that, because essentially at that point you've got low overhead as long as you've got somebody to do it. The
Right.
market is there.
That's
Right.
And
true.
it's just essentially untapped money for these struggling locations that they're not necessarily able to utilize at the village. So um it's worked out really good, and so between that and the jail, we're going nonstop. We're closed on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, but we have, between me and Christy, we have about 16-hour days at the very least. Usually what we try to do is one will work the day shift and one will work the night, but once
Mm.
we took on rugby as well, usually we're both working day, and if we've got investigations or walks at both locations, we're then also working the night shift too. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. But see, even though they always say that, if you love what you do, then you never work a day in your life, and
100%.
I'm so
Mhm.
glad that you're able to do this in your passion, because like with me, for instance, I'm clergy,
Mhm.
but I work in paranormal, and I also do residential cases too.
Yeah.
I work residential cases for our order and everything. So I mean, I get doing that. Um, and I love investigating. I love.
Yes.
I've got my own equipment and everything, and I love going in and investigating. Especially if you watch Discovery and Travel Channel on February. Angie and I, my wife, were on a show called My Haunted Hometown.
Okay.
Um, and we filmed there off one of my cases, my residential cases. And
Gotcha.
that's going to be on there. And I mean, it was such a just a good. We were able to identify exactly what it was. We used equipment. We used spirit
Yeah.
boxes. We used music boxes. I mean, we have all that. So that's always good to keep in your back pocket, because like sometimes, as clergy, you can go in and just do the clergy work. But when you're able to do some paranormal investigating and then do some clergy clearing and
Mhm.
cleansing,
Mhm.
it makes a complete experience. and
Oh,
and
100%.
and I definitely love doing that. Do you carry your own equipment with you?
I do, and, it's one of those things where I'm able to essentially keep my especially now that I'm doing the lives, I'm able to keep my equipment light because I am traveling on the motorcycle,
Yeah, yeah,
and
I'm about to say,
so
yeah.
yeah, it's now when we were filming and I still also put out produced shows and stuff. So when I'm doing that, it's usually just myself and one other person, somebody that's
Mhm.
helping me film. But for the lives, I've been doing those solo, which is a lot of fun too. But if I have someone with me, they help me by carrying some of the like filming equipment. But
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I've created these little packs that I'll use. I have almost essentially like a go bag that I
Yeah.
use for my big tools. That's a sling shoulder bag that will keep
Hmm.
the larger things like the REM pod, the EDI plus box, dowsing
Hmm.
rods, that sort of thing. But because I have to be sort of creative with my investigating, I'll use battery powered static cameras,
Hmm.
and I made these little packs. They're like a little small Tupperware dish, if you will, that will fit into saddlebags on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And each of those has some different items. Like an example would be static camera, a audio recorder to go with the static camera, a laser grid, a flashlight, some type of tool, whether it be well, the flashlight would be one, and then that like a cat ball, something so that when the static camera is set up there, gives something to interact with, and then also an additional recorder to where if it's a very large location, I like to pre-record questions and I can see if because I really like to dig deep and see. I believe that
Yeah.
a lot of what we experience is the energy that we bring into a location.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
Yes, it
100%.
is.
Yeah, and it's not always I'm not saying necessarily that we, create it, but we essentially, I think, can influence what's there with the energy we bring in,
Yep.
and so I like to see why is that? Is it our specific energy? Is it the questions we're asking? Is it just simply interacting? And so that's why sometimes I like to pre-record questions because then you can go in, you can play the pre-recorded questions, see what happens, and then later go in yourself and ask those same questions and see if what the influence is on the activity. So those are some of the different things that I have inside of those little packets. I have about 6 of those that I'll take and deploy whenever I'm doing an investigation. And so
Yeah.
then I always have my tools when I'm going in and actively investigating, but the others whenever for the rooms if either I don't get in there or if I'm trying to sort of compensate for the fact that it's just myself.
Yeah, yeah. See, that's great. And you hit the nail on the head there, especially, you know, when you go in, if you bring in, you know, positive energy, respect,
Mhm.
integrity going in, and you're you're going to create a good environment for a good experience.
Yeah.
If you want to have a positive experience on an investigation, then you need to bring that kind of energy into the investigation.
Mhm.
And
100%.
and I've never agreed with people that go in there and they egg
Mhm.
entity, they like try to bring out
Yeah.
the bad side in things,
Exactly.
because you're going to get back, you know, the the energy that you put into it.
Mhm.
And people really don't understand that, and it's just refreshing to hear someone, with that take on it also, because that's so important when you go to these investigations. If you're respectful, and you show a good side, you bring good
Mhm.
energy in, you're more than likely you're going to have a good experience in that location.
That's
Yeah.
100% true, and I've seen it on several occasions. I've experienced it myself, and I've experienced it as a location owner with teams that come in there. And, for me, so the first thing is riding the motorcycle for me is a great way to get grounded and a great
Mhm.
way
Oh,
to
yeah.
center myself. And so that always works out well, but I don't like to go into locations and investigate one if I'm extremely stressed, if my mind is not focused on the investigation, and or if I have anything going on. That's why drama and all the negativity in the paranormal field is so toxic, I believe, to what we're trying
It is.
to do, because it absolutely affects everything else that's going on, and it affects your experience. So I try to not have any of that when
Right.
I'm going into these locations. Now, I mean, if I'm going live, I always get a little bit antsy and anxious when I'm doing lives and speaking and that sort of thing. So that adds a little bit when I'm doing these investigations live, but as a whole, I try to put all that stuff aside. And I've seen it to where I really kind of I like a dark haunting. I'm not gonna lie. I like the story behind a dark haunting.
Yeah.
But it's
Of course.
also,
Yeah.
yeah, it's also though to go in and see if what I experience versus what others have experienced. So
Right.
an
Exactly.
example was, I've highlighted a couple of those type of locations in my earlier seasons, and I knew the history when I went in, but I only knew briefly of what other people had experiences, not really details of their experiences, but when you hear about a place, if
Oh,
a
yeah.
place has a dark haunting, you kind of hear, some of the things people have experienced.
Right.
So I went in with a totally different attitude, not approaching it from the dark haunting, and ended up in both of those locations getting different types of activity than what the reputation of the location had from
Mm.
other people, because
Mhm.
after I did the investigation, I then went to research, reading books, and watching videos of other people's experiences, and I found it was very different than, what I had. Now, I still had a lot of activity in both of these places, it was just different activity. And the other example of this is being in the jail or being at rugby. We'll take the jail for example because it's a jail. It's a place, we have no demons or anything like that in there. But you're a jail. So you get some people that have had a heavier past, I guess you could
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
in some
Inmates.
of them. Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
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 And, when teams come in and the teams have a good energy about them, they're positive, you can tell that they're just a good cohesive team. 9 times out of 10, they have a much better experience when they come in
Mhm.
there, and I can kinda tell a lot when I'm taking them on their tour and how they're acting, if they're positive and upbeat and all this, or getting along really well, most of the time are they have a really good experience, or at least when I say a good experience, they have a more active night than when
Right.
they come in and kind of have a different demeanor to them. So we
Yeah.
see it, and you can really kind of track all that because we're in it every day, and we've seen so many teams come in, and hearing what they've had, we're able to really do some intense research on that sort of thing and track all of that because like I said, we see it.
Well, it's always good too, you talk about doing the research and everything, but it's always good when you get evidence and stuff, especially through a spirit box or, EVPs, things like that. And then you can go back through and you can see from your evidence if it matches the things that in history there. And it just solidifies that you're on the right path with your investigation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm a firm believer in that I think that we really do influence a lot
We do.
of the
We do.
activity that we have, so and it's been really interesting to see that. And there's been other times too that it's like we go in with trigger items and are trying to
Love those.
essentially trigger, these spirits. But it's really interesting with depending on how we go in, how they can essentially trigger us back depending on our emotions and our aura and energy and stuff that we go in with. So,
Now, Miranda, I have a question for you. And this is,
absolutely.
do you have a spirit guide that you know about that you use sometimes?
Not that I know about. I mean, I'm sure I probably do, but no, not that I know about.
I was just curious. I know not everybody does, but I feel like you do have one, and I was just wondering. So.
Well, it's okay. So it's interesting. And it really kind of showed up this past season. Like I said, we covered antique shops, and the neat thing about this season, again, nobody had investigated these antique shops that we did. We did 5 different locations, and each of those locations were located in historic areas, or at least towns that had a really interesting history of how they were created. And then these buildings had interesting history. One of them was a former funeral home back in the early
Yes.
1900s.
Oh,
Yep. And then another one was right there at the railroad. One was a comic book shop, and it had been an old bank and an old five and dime store. So these buildings, each one of them, had a very long history. Dahlonega itself, one of those was a home for like recovering addicts. They like a mission, and then with Dahlonega, that was the site of the first gold rush. So you had another one of them, because I did 2 locations in Dahlonega, and it was over an old gold mine there.
Oh,
So
wow.
we had all of these things that could create activity inside the building itself. And then you couple that with all the antiques and the collections. And so my thought was, it's like, okay, so what's going to create my activity tonight? Is it going to be something that I experience like an attachment to an item? Because you literally
Mm.
have thousands of items in these
Yes.
locations. Or is it a spirit that some of the folks inside of the location had experienced? And I have to say, I probably experienced some of the most intelligent activity there at these locations. There wasn't a single location that didn't have some type of unexplained activity happening. But one I want to point out for sure, when you'd mentioned spirit guide. So in the second episode there of season 7, I was in this, they didn't let me disclose the location on this particular one, but it was an antique shop that was at one point in time an old funeral home.
Mm.
And so I was in this room, and they had said that there was a child. So they had about 3 or 4 different spirits that they were able to pinpoint that the owners of this location had experienced. And one of them was a child. And so naturally at this point, I decided I was going to start. And and what I do on the lives is I actually let people tell me where to start and stuff. And so everyone wanted me to start there in the room with all the kids' toys.
Oh yeah.
And so start asking questions. And I've got flashlights up, I've got the EDI box, I've got the SLS camera, and I've got the tripwire set up in this room. And I'm asking these questions, things are lighting up. So I decided to go get the Ovilus 5. And because I thought maybe they'll send me on some type of scavenger hunt or whatever.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. Oh, get this.
Yeah.
This was amazing. My opinion of the Ovilus 5 has dramatically changed during my season 7. Sometimes it seems like what they say are just random words and such. Well, the first and one of the things you have to think of with the Ovilus is when you get certain words, because it is a word bank that say has 2,500 words in it. There's certain words that maybe the spirit is trying to get out there, but the word is not in the word box. So sometimes you have to look at it and use discernment to
Mhm.
see what they're talking about. So the first thing I got on that was the word angle. And so I thought, I wonder if they mean angel. And it said angle. And it said, I started asking questions. I said, is that your name? Was that a nickname? And then I got Halo. And of course, if you know anything about the
Angel.
Ovilus 5, yep. If you know anything about that, it's not connected to the phone or anything of that nature.
It's
It's an
definitely not.
independent device. So I kind of went down that line of questioning, and I ended up turning so I determined that maybe her name was Angel. And I ended up turning the light on and going and looking. And I wanted to see if there was an angel or something sitting nearby. And of course, the flashlight was lighting up as I'm asking these questions to confirm. And on the shelf, 2 shelves above, was this little angel. Now, this is a bank, and they had uh, on the tag. I've actually taken the tag off there, but when I set this up, I'm going to have the tag with it. What was fascinating about this was it had the price, and it was supposed to say on it Angel Bank. However, they had misspelled the word angel and it said angle.
Angle. Wow.
And I was like, holy crap, this is
That's it. That's
Yeah.
it.
I mean, it was
Mhm.
probably one of the most amazing things that had happened. So then we continued that line of questioning. Well, of course, at that point, now I don't think there's anything attached to this item or anything. I think, it was just a favorite item of somebody there in the store. So I was like, I've got to buy this. And so I ended up, when I got it, we asked the lady who runs the store, and she said she just moved that in there earlier that week. And so what's fascinating about this is throughout all the remainder of the episodes, I kept getting the word angle. So I don't know if it was essentially a spirit guide. I don't know if it was an angel. I don't know if it was a spirit that was kind of following me throughout this journey of this season. Regardless, I think that it was someone that definitely wanted to show intelligently
Mhm.
that they were there and give us something to identify. It's those things like that it
I
I
love
wouldn't
it.
yeah, I wouldn't say, I won't usually ever, even at the jail and at rugby, I won't say something is haunted. I'll just say something is potentially unexplained. And, for me, this is what I look for, are things like this, that it's like, I have no idea how to explain that.
Right,
These
right.
2 circumstances, with getting the words on the obelisk. And we've had that happen several times at the jail and on other investigations with the obelisk. But this time it was just absolutely undisputable.
That's
So
amazing. That's amazing. I've got an
Yes, it
idea.
is.
I've got an idea for you, for your trigger items and things like that. If a good way to, for me at least, to find out that if there is an attachment, if they're attached to a certain trigger item, if you take someone that's sitting still and you put a cat ball in their lap,
okay.
and then you communicate, and then you say, if you're attached to any of these, if this is your favorite one, um, light this cat ball up,
Hmm.
and they'll start lighting up, and they'll actually show you with the cat balls.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do that sort of thing with the flashlights.
Hmm.
I'm you can't hardly find the mini mag lights anymore, and I think it's because I bought them all out before
Amazon.
they
Are you
quit
talking about the
selling them.
ones this little, like
No,
that size?
they're about about
Yeah,
like
yeah.
yeah.
Amazon's got
Oh,
Okay.
a good bit of
and
them.
Maglite itself, that company. I got little ones
Okay.
about that
Hmm.
big that I love. They're
Okay.
just cute. It's you don't
Yeah.
see I use those, and I got those from Maglite itself. So
Okay. We had the same thing happen. I played poker with some spirits there at Haygood Mill and did the
Wow.
yes,
same with the cards. Had the flashlights lined up and I was dealing cards to 3 different people that we were playing with here, and they started lighting up. So I would think that would work the same way with cat balls or with flashlights doing the same thing in the locations. I really want to go back and develop this season out a little bit further
hmm
because, we did all those live and it's kind of hard to really dive in as deep in 2 hours
yeah,
um,
it
on a
is.
live. Now, we did do some investigations after the live had ended that we'll release as a produced episode. But I'm really kind of in love with antique shops now just because of all the different directions that you
The
can go.
history, the
Oh,
history of
absolutely.
everything in there. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And, when you think about one of the store owners was telling me, she said,
I love them.
yeah, she said you wouldn't believe the people when they come in, just how these antique shops affect like you and I when we walk in. She said, I've had so many people that will come in and they'll go to check out and there'll
Hmm
be one lady in particular, she was crying and she had a Tupperware set or a glass set that she was buying and she's like, my grandmother had this. This takes me back to my
Mm,
childhood. So just the emotion that we take
nostalgia.
in there absolutely can affect what's going on. Like I said, it's probably one of my favorite seasons just because it was so different, and to me it was kind of showing also a positive side on the
Hmm.
paranormal as well, that not everything has to be creepy, scary.
Right,
um
No,
you
it
know
right.
doesn't.
you
Not
can
at
really
all.
learn a lot.
That's exactly it. And you said you were talking about, with the energy about going into locations and things like that. When I teach protections and I teach clearing and cleansings, and one thing that I always do before we go into a location is when I do a cleansing, I use frankincense. Frankincense is biblical. It was used in Old Testament and New Testament times. It is a neutralizer of any and all negative energy. So if you light a frankincense incense and you're standing outside and you take it across yourself, go across your arms and say, I release any and all negative energy from me, around me, and in the place that I will be. And when you do that, you're releasing any of the negative aspects that are possibly with you, around you, going into a place. And then when you leave there, do the same thing again. And it leaves and neutralizes the energy there again.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. And I love the smell of frankincense anyways. I
Yeah.
use that in my diffuser.
Well, if you use it, because like in the Old Testament, you have the old synagogues, and they had where the Ark of the Covenant was, right above it was the altar of incense. And on the altar of incense, they would burn frankincense. Well, in the Old Testament, God would hover across the top of the synagogue, literally hover across. And it says that it was pleasing to God. So anything that is pleasing to God, and also it was brought to Jesus' feet when he was
Mhm.
born.
I was
So
gonna say that. Yeah.
so there's a lot of biblical aspects to frankincense, but it is known theologically, it is
Mhm.
known to neutralize negative energy. And it's very good when you're doing a cleansing. Like if it's a negative entity or something in there, it neutralizes the energy of them being able to put negative out to you. And then it's just a good start when you do the cleansing and clearing of a house. But it's also good to get the negative away out from you and around your environment also.
Oh, absolutely. And and that's one of the things I always consider being a solo investigator, because I feel as though I feel like there's positives and negatives to both, to being a
Yes.
solo and to being in a group. And one of the things is, honestly, you never know what you're going to encounter when you
Right.
go into these places. And
No, you
so,
don't.
as a solo person, um, if I'm with one other person who's filming and not actively investigating, or if I'm truly by myself,
Hmm.
um, you can become obviously more affected, because there's not that equal distribution of energy
Right.
whenever you're
Correct.
communicating with someone. You're taking it all on yourself. You're not
Correct.
with a group that can be dispersed, differently, depending on what you're putting out or what you're taking on. And so that's definitely something to always consider. And if I'm doing somewhere that does have a reputation of a negative haunting, I always make sure I have somebody else with me
Good.
whenever I'm doing that, just for that purpose.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's always good. It's always good, especially with you doing solo investigations like that. And if you're doing them by yourself, it's very vital that you guard, that you protect yourself, that you ground yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're by yourself, you're more open to you know being influenced in a
Yeah.
spiritual way with whatever energy is in there.
Hmm.
And
Absolutely.
I think it's very important that you protect yourself.
Absolutely.
What is like one of your most profound investigations, like where you can remember and you'll never forget it? Tell us about one of
Mm.
those.
Oh gosh, that's a challenging question, because I feel like, each investigation is so special, in
Hmm.
a lot of them in different ways. And I always feel like, even if it's a quiet night, I always feel like I come out learning something
Yeah.
from those different locations. Um, you know, I guess uh, probably. Hmm, Probably one of my most profound, I would have to say, would be from my earlier season. It's actually a combination of episodes that was put out in season one, and I don't know that it's necessarily, I guess, because it was such a long investigation. So I started out in season one investigating these local legends, and
Hmm.
I was investigating a legend of it came out of Charleston, Tennessee, and it was about a monk who had perished in a train wreck accident. And the doctor, the legend goes that the doctor took the body of the monk to his house and
Mm.
dissolved the skin from the bones and used the skeleton in his doctor's office, which in the
Wow.
1860s most of the skeletons were real skeletons.
Mhm.
And so that's a story that came out of 13 Ghosts and Jeffrey that was about that specific area. A lot of people around the country know about it. Well, I investigated this local legend. I went to Charleston, Tennessee, investigated where the train wreck took place, and then through a connection of my videographer, we gained access to the an old tub that had been purchased from the doctor's estate sale. This tub was being stored in a house that was vacant. The homeowner was elderly. She had used it as a rental property, and at this point, it was just storage. So she allowed us to go in and investigate this alleged tub. So while we were in there, all these things, very interesting things, were happening in the home on the second floor. And so this home ended up, I reached out to the homeowner. She actually told me of some dark things that had happened in the home in the 70s and that her family had experienced. And so she's like, if you want to investigate the home, you can. So we did a little mini investigation, got some crazy things. So I ended up inviting my friend Tiffany White, that I typically investigate dark hauntings with, brought her in. We investigated this, and it ended up turning into a year-long case study for me, and I was able to highlight it on multiple episodes. So after we determined that there were at least 5 spirits in this home. The homeowner decides she's going to rent the house out. And she's like, now that you've determined all this, she's like, can you get rid of it? And I'm like, I don't do that. I'm the person that you bring in to try to debunk stuff and try to see
I can do
the
that.
activity. Well, I ended up, I was speaking at a convention in Alabama, and I ended up meeting a dear friend who's a priest. And so he invited, he asked me if, I had any cases and stuff that I needed looked at. So I was like, it's funny you mentioned that. And this just shows God's timing. And so I said, it's funny you mentioned that. And so he reviewed everything that we had. And it was such a popular case there in season 1. It took up like 3 episodes. But what people didn't realize, so we were filming for season 2 at this point. I was going back on a weekly basis to this house, conducting experiments, and had reached out to this demonologist. And I said, could you come in and help with this? So he watched everything and he agreed. And he actually allowed us to film this essentially home exorcism that took place. It was about a 10-hour minor rites of exorcism that happened here at this home. And he allowed us to have the tools up while we were conducting this. And I have never heard, the house ended up catching on fire during the event. Yeah, the floor caught on fire. A bed in the room caught on fire from the candle. It's just sparked out while we were praying. We caught some mocking responses while we were doing certain things on our tools there, and some crazy EVPs. And we also were able to capture those signs of departure as the whole process took place. And then, of course, now they did end up remodeling the house at that point, moving a family in. The family is still there today. They've had no issues with it. But to be able to document this process was probably one of the most profound experiences, just because I had, I'm Baptist. And so,
I was a Baptist pastor for 3 years.
Yeah. So we just do potlucks and stuff. We don't do exorcisms.
Fried chicken.
Exactly. Church of the potluck, And so, so it was really interesting to, and of course my videographer, he is a, popular, Christian music artist. And so to come from our background and to, work with this demonologist, And for all of us, there was 5 of us there that this was going on. They had he had his medium that he works with, just a wonderful, devout woman. It was such an interesting process because you know what you see on TV and you know what you hear, but to experience it in real life and the crazy things that happened leading up to it that we were able to document, that is probably, I would have to say, while I love the history and all the stuff behind the places, that was probably one of my most profound, because it made me realize how strong and just some of the things that we are dealing with when we're in these different locations.
Absolutely. My wife and I would love to get together with you and investigate with you. And if you ever need, you know, clergy help and stuff like that, well, we've got your back. You know, we are the Solomonic Order of St. Michael the Archangel, so we deal with spiritual warfare, demonology, exorcism ministries, things of that nature. So we are more than happy to assist you any way we can.
Well, that's always
you guys.
good to know.
I hate to tell you this, but we got like 2 minutes. It's been like it's pretty time to go. You know.
I know. Hey, let's give a shout. Who's all been? I see people coming on. I just want to say hello to everybody.
Sean, Randy, Pam, Aaron. There's more that aren't saying anything, but we've got who else? Sonia Thompson. We've got of course your wife, Pat Patterson. We got I said Randy. We've got more, but a lot of people just aren't
commenting. Yeah. Hey guys, thank you guys so much for tuning in with us.
Yeah, Miranda, if you will, talk to us for a second after the show. But I'm gonna get out of here because we have another show coming in just a couple.
Well,
minutes.
I'll tell everybody real quick how to get a hold of you, Miranda.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for having me on the show, and thank you folks for watching. You can find me on Ghost Biker Explorations YouTube channel, Facebook page, or www.ghostbikerexplorations.com. You can watch all the past episodes for free, and then any of the live stuff we've got coming up, plus my Thursday night 9 p.m. Eastern podcast. And then if you're interested in investigation or following what we're doing at the jail or at Rugby, you can find all of that under Historic Scott County Jail, and that's historicscottcojail.com. and on YouTube and Facebook, and then also Historic Rugby After Dark, if you look that up, or you can get access to both of those websites if you visit historyhighwayshaunts.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. You've been an amazing guest. I'd like to have you back again if any way possible. We can do a round 2 and continue this conversation.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. Take us out, Shane. It's 8 o'clock.
Okay. All right. Take care, Miranda.
Yeah. Hang on for out. Yeah. Go ahead.
Guys, that was an awesome show. Thank you guys for tuning in. And it's always a pleasure having you guys watch, having you guys just comment and do things. That just shows that you really appreciate the show. And this has been an awesome show. She is an awesome guest. So guys, tune in next week. I got another awesome guest coming in, and you guys have a blessed week, and just stay positive, be blessed always, and remember, stay spooky, people. Peace. Have her